Now, the second thing is, I think you're referring to the mark-to-market rules in accounting. You know, accountants have always hated themselves because they only look back. They do history, and they're not relevant. I know I never felt relevant because I wanted to look forward. I didn't want to look back. And so they have gone more and more saying, if you know what something is worth, you got to change that on the balance sheet. You can no longer leave General Motors on the balance sheet at 100 because that's where you bought it when it's now 15. You got to mark it down to 15. Well, they finally said you got to mark down every security you've got to market. And they were aware that in many cases there isn't any market for these new securitizations with, you know, which they chopped up in pieces and so. So they said, well, then you got to find them. We construct a market. If there's been a fire sale, you got to use that. Well, the accountants being the, you know, we had CYA, and believe me, that was important. So the accountants, if they've got to go in and value these things, and there isn't any real way, they sure aren't going to value them very high. So there's a huge write-downs being taken to market where there isn't any market. So this new law has a provision in it which allows the SEC to change that rule. They've already changed it, softened it to some extent about a week ago. And they'll be doing more. And that will, to some extent, help the banks because they won't have to take such book losses. And a lot of people have said that's the basis of all the problem. If I were you, I wouldn't believe that, you know. The basis of the problem is that the banks didn't do the subprime, they bought it. And the community banks went in at the other end. They financed the developers. So while the banks themselves weren't the key issue in subprime, you know, as bankers will, they got into it sled length, both on the customer side and on the financing side. And so that'll help, and they'll fix the accounting a little bit. But a lot of people have suggested, let's go back to historical, let's forget, or let's give them certificates and count it as capital. As soon as something like this happens, the accountants are a great place to fix it by cooking the books. And you remember the S&L scandal? Well, the S&Ls were, most of them broke, but they didn't want to show that they were broke. So how did they change the accounting? They said, well, the way you'll determine your capital is you'll average it over 5 years. So if 3 years ago you had capital, when you average it, you got capital today, even though there isn't any capital there. Well, you know, that's useful so the regulators can fool themselves, but it doesn't fool the marketplace, and it really doesn't do any good. So I don't think they're going to repeal it. That's what boy, that was a long answer. You know, I'm sorry. That's terrible. I mean, I'm on TV, and I never can give an answer that's more than 60 seconds. Sir?
The auction rate bond market dried up in February and March of this year. Liquidity and illiquidity was known at that time. Nothing was done about it. Was that relevant to this situation?
Yeah, that's another one, the auction rate marketplace, which is really, if you look at finance, it's trying to get short-term rates to finance long-term assets. And the auction rate market was a way to get short-term rates on long-term bonds by having an auction every couple of weeks. It was marketed, I would say, fraudulently, and most of the institutions that have marketed it have now refunded the money to consumers, not to businesses. But there are a lot of fraud suits out there. That's clearly another part of the perfect storm, and it is part of I guess, believing that the market will regulate itself if you'll just let those good people go out there and bargain on their own. Alan Greenspan, who is a great man and a great friend of mine from time to time, but yeah, you know, he spent 10 years with Ayn Rand, and he believed that people were economic machines. Not that they were never fraudulent, they never got mad, they were perfect economic machines. And unfortunately, it turns out that's not a very accurate description of how people behave, particularly when they can make a bundle of money in a hurry and get out before they get caught. And the auction rate thing was really one of the more reprehensible things that mainly investment banks did, but banks did it, they all did it. So I hope none of you had that, but if you do have auction rate securities, you should be able to get them redeemed by most everyone, because the attorneys general went in and said, you're going to redeem these or else, and they have in most cases. All right, is everybody ready to go back to work and do something productive?
All right.
Thank you very much.
I'm the president of the Alumni Association.
Oh, hi. Nice to see you.
Before you leave, we just have a couple of announcements. I'm Kathy Vogelsang. I'm the president of the Seidman College of Business Alumni Association. I'd like to thank Bill Seidman on behalf of the Alumni Association, and we have a small token of our appreciation for him being here today, both from the Alumni Association and from the Hauenstein Center for Presidential Studies. So I'd just like to give those to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Who says there's a recession? Look at that.
I'd also like to invite you to mark your calendars. We have 2 more breakfast series coming up before the end of the year. First, on October 21st, we have Kevin Holloway, president of the Animal Agriculture of Monsanto Company. He will be here to discuss Monsanto and the business of feeding the world. And then the next one after that is on November 11th. Peter Secchia is sponsoring our breakfast series, which features Blake Kruger. He is the president and CEO of Wolverine Worldwide. Both of those events will be right here in the Loosemore Auditorium at 7:30 a.m. Thank you, everybody, for coming today, and I look forward to seeing you at our future events. Enjoy the rest of your day.